Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan Elro.
And I'm Rebecca Rand.
In our top story, Honduras will become the next nation to relocate its embassy to the Israeli capital, Jerusalem. A statement released by the office of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Honduras and Israel will hold a mutual opening and inauguration of their embassies in their respective capitals of Tegucigalpa and Jerusalem before the end of the current year. Earlier this month, Serbia, Kosovo, and Malawi announced they will open embassies in Jerusalem, joining the United States and Guatemala in the Holy City. This flurry of unprecedented diplomatic activity can be attributed to U.S. President Donald Trump's monumental decision to relocate the United States Embassy in 2018. The Trump administration also brokered the recent normalization agreements between the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Israel. At that time, he indicated that several more Arab and Muslim states will be following suit. Rebecca has more on this developing story.
Yes, Yochanan, the White House has made unparalleled strides with Arab and Muslim states in marathon negotiations to normalize relations with the Jewish state. Last week, members of the Trump administration met with Sudanese officials for decisive talks regarding Khartoum's recognition of Israel. Sources in the White House say that up to 9 other Arab countries, including Morocco, Sudan, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia, are on the road to making peace with Israel. President Trump said that progress is happening relatively easily, explaining that the Arab states involved are tired of fighting and want security and peace.
A female Arab resident of Jerusalem has been arrested for spying for Hezbollah. Israel's internal security organization, the Shin Bet, revealed that Yasmin Jaber was recruited by the Lebanese terror group in 2015 while attending an international youth conference in Beirut. Since her enlistment into the terror group, Jaber corresponded with her handlers by way of social media, where she was instructed to recruit other Israeli Arabs for Hezbollah. Shin Bet released a statement saying that her arrest is the product of a lengthy intelligence operation to locate those suspected of working for Hezbollah. It's another step in the counterterrorism efforts carried out against Iranian forces and Hezbollah's attempts to recruit Israeli Arabs.
President Trump has issued an executive order instituting crippling sanctions against Iran. The penalties target export controls on more than 24 entities and individuals that support Tehran's nuclear, missile, and conventional arms programs. Washington has taken a strong stance against Iran's rogue nuclear program, which, according to a recent report, could produce an atomic bomb by the end of this year. The arms embargo against Tehran expires in October, and the Trump administration stressed that if restrictions are not applied, the fanatic Islamic regime could potentially purchase conventional weapons from Russia and China. The push to impose stiff penalties comes on the heels of a Reuters report citing evidence that Tehran has resumed its long-range missile cooperation with nuclear-armed North Korea.
A Bulgarian court has sentenced 2 members of Hezbollah to life in prison for their role in the bombing of a bus transporting vacationing Israelis. The Lebanese nationals were involved in planting explosives on a tour bus of Israelis at the Black Sea airport in the resort city of Borgas. They carried out one of the worst attacks on Israeli citizens abroad, killing 5 and wounding 38. One assailant was also killed in the blast, as well as the Bulgarian bus driver. The other 2 terrorists managed to escape. They were tried in absentia, found guilty, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Interpol has issued a red notice for the wanted Hezbollah operatives.
Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has become the first Jewish person to lay in state at the U.S. Capitol after passing away last week. She is also the first woman to lie in repose at the Capitol, an honor that is reserved for America's most revered figures. Her death just 6 weeks before the upcoming presidential election has led to electrified political discourse in Washington, setting up a showdown between Republicans and Democrats as to who will replace her on the Supreme Court.
2 United States lawmakers have reached out to the president of Poland over rising anti-Semitism in his country and Warsaw's continued refusal to make reparations to Jewish victims of the Holocaust. In a letter addressed to President Andrzej Duda, Senators Jackie Rosen of Nevada and James Lankford of Oklahoma said, "We are alarmed by growing anti-Semitic discourse in Poland and scapegoating of the Jewish community, which runs counter to our nation's shared values. The senators who co-chair the bipartisan task force for anti-Semitism noted America's close defense ties with Poland and warned that the relationship could be affected if Warsaw fails to address rising anti-Semitism.
The United Arab Emirates has opened the country's first kosher restaurant in the world's tallest building. Dubai's Armani Kaf restaurant, located in the luxury Armani Hotel, is certified glatt kosher. The Gulf state recently signed the Abraham Accords, normalizing ties with Israel, and the opening of this fine dining establishment comes on the heels of an announcement by Emirati leaders that all hotels should prepare kosher food options. Observant Jews follow strict dietary laws, and the kosher certified restaurant will be under the supervision of the UAE's Chabad rabbi, allowing traveling Israelis and Jews living in the country to enjoy a kosher fine dining experience.
Cyclist Guy Niv has become the first Israeli to complete the Tour de France. Niv rode for the Team Israel Startup Nation, which competed at the Tour for the first time. Team owner Sylvan Adams praised Niv as a brave kid who faced his country's and his team's expectations and never blundered. He said, "As a team, we were in the game in almost every stage. And although we did not get the coveted stage win, Israel Startup Nation finished with 7 top 10s. Adams said they will be back next year with a strengthened cycling team.
A 27-year-old American yeshiva student has purchased the majority shareholding of Israel's El Al Airlines. Eli Rosenberg, a native of New York who now resides in Jerusalem, bought the 42.85% stake in the company for $107 million. The coronavirus pandemic decimated the Israeli airliner, forcing it to lay off 80% of its workers. Jerusalem has vowed to bail out the nation's flagship airline, and the finance ministry announced a $400 million rescue package, which called for the sale of the majority of the company's shares on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. The state agreed to purchase $30 million in unwanted shares, equaling to a 12% stake in El Al.
The high-tech city of Tel Aviv has launched Israel's first electrified road. The White City aims to become the first municipality in the world with a network of smart roads that recharge electric cars and buses while they are in motion. The pilot project called for the electrification of a 2,000-foot stretch of road under a 1-mile bus lane built in the center of the booming metropolis. The technology, created by the Israeli startup Electron, is already in use in Sweden and will be installed in Germany by the end of this year. The Tel Aviv municipality released a statement saying that if the pilot program is successful, the city plans to equip more roads with this below-surface power supply.
The Jewish state has announced a growth of nearly 2% over the last year, bringing the population to over 9 million. Life expectancy in the Jewish state is among the highest in the world. Israeli women live to an average of 84.7 years and men to 81. Since last Rosh Hashanah, the population has grown by 150,000, and the Census Bureau estimates that the country will reach 10 million residents by 2024. 6.8 million, or 74% of the residents, are Jewish, 1.9 million, or 21%, are Arabs, and about 460,000 are Christians and other religions. Israel remains a bastion of peace and tolerance in the Middle East, and more than 88% of Israelis report being satisfied with their lives.
The Jewish people will begin the observance of the Day of Atonement this week. From sundown on the evening of September 27th until after sunset on September 28th, Jews will fast and pray for forgiveness from God. Yom Kippur is the holiest day on the Jewish calendar, when the entire nation of Israel collectively afflicts their souls by refraining from food and water and praying for deliverance. The days after Rosh Hashanah leading up to Yom Kippur are known as the Days of Awe, where the Jewish people recite special slichot prayers and request forgiveness for any wrongdoing from others, so that by the Day of Atonement they will be humble when they ask for forgiveness from God. We are living in mysterious yet miraculous times. We've witnessed the most remarkable fulfillment of biblical prophecy, the Jewish people's return to Israel, and the prosperity and contributions of this tiny country in such a short time. Yet we've also seen an unexpected rise in anti-Semitism, which takes the form of anti-Zionism, and alliances between groups that are fighting against the most fundamental biblical values. In the book Titus, Trump, and the Triumph of Israel, Josh Reinstein answers important questions to clarify what has driven political action from the time that the Roman Emperor Titus destroyed Jerusalem until today, when President Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Get your copy today and learn how faith-based diplomacy has changed the world. To order your advance copy, go to triumphofisrael.com.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Sondra Baras. She's the founder and director of Christian Friends of Israeli Communities. Sondra, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Sondra, tell our viewers a little about what is Christian Friends of Israeli Communities.
Well, we are the only Christian vehicle out there that connects Christians from all over the world with the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, otherwise known as the settlements.
Well, tell us why it's so important that Christians, Bible-believing Christians even, are affiliated with Judea and Samaria. Why is that important to them?
Well, it's important to them because the Bible is important to them. And we, the communities, I live in Samaria myself, our communities are located in the heart of biblical Israel in Judea and Samaria. Anybody who values the Bible is going to value a Jewish presence in this part of Israel.
Well, you're a Jewish woman, you're a religious Jewish woman, so why did you decide to build this bridge with Bible-believing Christians?
I fell into it. I had been advocating for the communities of Judea and Samaria for some time, and here and there I encountered Christians who were far more supportive of what I was advocating than your average media and even the average Jewish audiences. And somehow that idea started to percolate, and it was actually a Christian family who gave me the idea, and we started it.
Well, tell us some about the activities of the organization. What do you actually do?
Well, first of all, education. It is every Christian that we encounter knows their Bible. I don't have to convince them that the land of Israel belongs to Judeans, that the land of Israel belongs to the people of Israel. I don't have to teach them that a city like Hebron is biblically significant. But what they don't necessarily know is what Hebron is like today and how the settlement movement that they hear so much about in the media is actually fulfilling biblical prophecy.
You know, I hear a lot of people talking about sovereignty in the Christian community. It's a very important issue to them. They want Jewish sovereignty in Judea and Samaria. Yet there are people out there saying, you know, Christians don't really care about this. What is your answer to them?
I think they care deeply. In fact, I received so many responses, so many letters, emails, Facebook comments, as soon as the deal with the United Arab Emirates was announced. Because of that one little clause that said we're going to be shelving for now or for whatever this process of sovereignty. They're very disturbed by that thought.
I understand there's been a big backlash, but I think Donald Trump knows his base, and I believe that he's going to declare that it's Israel's right to do sovereignty if they want to before the elections. Do you think that's a fair assessment, or do you think that this is just a missed opportunity?
I have no idea. In fact, I'm very disturbed because I believe that Netanyahu and the Israeli government definitely missed an opportunity, and they should have moved forward with applying sovereignty immediately. Certainly by, May, June, when there was already a government. They could have even done it under the initial government, the provisional government. I'm not quite sure why they didn't do it. Unfortunately, the information we're receiving in the media is based on rumors. Nobody really knows what's going on. Nobody knows what Trump really wants to do. I wish I knew, but I have no idea.
You know, we talk about Christian tourism a lot on the show, and obviously Shiloh, Hebron, Beit El is more significant to people who believe in the Bible than Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Beersheba. Are you seeing an influx, before Corona obviously, of Christians visiting these communities?
Well, actually, that's one of the things we do. Even before these areas became popular, we were bringing Christian groups there and introducing them to to these areas. And we were visiting tour companies here in Israel, trying to convince them, and I think successfully convincing them, that if they see themselves as expert in Christian tourism, they need to put these places on the agenda. And one of the things we do that unfortunately has been completely canceled with this whole Corona time is arranging tour programs for Christian tours from all over the world in Judea and Samaria. And before Corona, we would have an average of 2 groups a week where we were coordinating their visit, not only showing them the biblical sites, but taking them into the communities and enabling them to meet the people on a personal level.
And you're also very much into tzedakah, charity.
Yes.
Tell us about some of the projects you support.
Well, what we do is we offer the opportunity to the communities throughout Judea and Samaria to let us know what they need. And then we put those needs out to our Christian audience, and thank God they respond very generously. So those needs can be just people who, needy families. We're working with social services departments all over Judea and Samaria, and we will provide food coupons, for example. And we've done that especially in an intensive way since the coronavirus crisis began, and we have such, skyrocketing unemployment, etc. But we're also working with programs for special needs children, for senior citizens, a lot of security and emergency equipment to keep these communities safe, the communities that are really the most vulnerable in Israel, making sure they have the security equipment they need.
And we're in a very, confusing time. We're going up now to the Day of Atonement. What do you think is the biggest need if people want to support something in Israel? What's the biggest need today?
Well, I would say 2 needs, okay? The first is security and emergency equipment. We have done a lot of that in 2020, but there's still more to be done. Surveillance cameras is particularly necessary right now. And other things, firefighting equipment. We have communities where Palestinians in the area are purposely lighting fires in order to endanger the families. And so we have to make sure we have firefighting equipment. So that's one. And again, because of the economic crisis that we're seeing in Israel, the people in Judea and Samaria, like all over Israel, are just in need of financial assistance to help them buy food and to help them provide their most basic needs.
We're seeing here also a health crisis, obviously, with the corona. How was Judea and Samaria affected? Were the communities better well equipped, or was it pretty much the same as Israel?
Well, I think that to a certain degree, certainly at the beginning, we had a less incidence than in other places, simply because we're less densely populated. We have very few cities, mostly smaller communities, and so the opportunity for massive infection was reduced. I don't know how the figures compare to everywhere else today, but I can tell you in my own community, there have been a few people who have been infected and lots of people who have been in isolation to ensure that they don't infect anyone else.
Your organization has been around for a while now. What's the future of the organization?
For as long as there are Christians who love Israel and whose relationship to Israel is based on the Bible, I think we have a very strong future. Because this issue of the communities and Jewish rights to Judea and Samaria, unfortunately, will remain a controversial one. And we will remain a target of those people who are anti-Israel and people that are part of the BDS movement. We will always be that basic target. So we will always need strong allies. And it is, thank God for our Christian friends, because they are the people that are our strongest group of people that can stand up and support us and face those others that are trying so hard to destroy us.
Sondra, there are literally millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
Well, I have to tell you, we need you. We need you to raise our voices. This issue of sovereignty that has just, has it on the table, off the table, we need you. We need you to help us, and we need you to raise your voices. Judea and Samaria belongs to the people of Israel.
Thank you, Sondra, for being on the show, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, wishing you a meaningful Day of Atonement. Now back to the studio.
Up next, the return to Zion with Karen Hayesod.
Hello and welcome to the Return to Zion with Karen Hayesod. I'm Sam Grundwerg, World Chairman of Keren HaYesod, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. It was foretold that the children of Israel would return to their land on the wings of eagles. This is why it was so important for Keren HaYesod to support the establishment of Israel's first airline. I hope you enjoy, and God bless you from Jerusalem.
The divine promise of bringing the children of Israel to their land was given to Moses at the foot of Mount Sinai. I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to me, as it is written in the book of Exodus, is a prophecy that has sparked the immigration for 3,000 years. And with the establishment of the Zionist movement and the State of Israel, it has begun to be fulfilled. Eagles made of steel of El Al Airlines have taken to the skies of the Holy Land, carrying with them hundreds of thousands of new immigrants to Israel. They have come from Yemen and Iraq, from North Africa and Ethiopia, from Russia and Ukraine. El Al, Israel's flagship carrier, was established with the support of the donors of Keren HaYesod, a global organization authorized by the Israeli government to raise funds for Israel's most important priority projects. Most urgent is the task of bringing Jews to Israel from countries of distress where they face danger. Just after Israel's establishment, nearly 50,000 Jews were brought to Israel from the ancient Yemenite Jewish community. In 1951 and 1952, more than 130,000 Jews from Iraq were brought home to safety in Israel. El Al Airlines was a key player in these airlifts and in waves of immigration since. Perhaps no one better epitomizes Israel's immigration story than Aryeh Oz. He was accepted into the pilot school of the Israel Air Force and earned his pilot's wings in 1956, and after completing his military service, joined El Al Airlines. He returned to the Air Force in 1991 to fly a jumbo jet taking Ethiopian Jews home to Israel in Operation Solomon.
We were about to evacuate 14,500 Ethiopian Jews from Addis Ababa to Tel Aviv. I flew a 747. We had 760 seats, and I sat on the floor between the seats. We had 1,087 souls on board. I said it's our obligation as the Jewish people to bring everybody to Israel. I felt so happy, that I took part in an operation like this. When we descended and came over Jerusalem, there was not one person in the cockpit who had no tears in his eyes.
For nearly 100 years, Keren HaYesod's vision has turned the dream of the return of the Jewish people to Israel into reality and remains at the center of efforts to sustain and develop a flourishing Jewish homeland in fulfillment of biblical prophecy.
Every time that when I made my walk around in order to see that the aircraft is serviceable, I always looked up and saw the Star of David and said to myself, gee, I'm flying El Al. This is El Al. This is Israel. This is the Jewish people.
Due to the coronavirus pandemic, we're expecting a massive wave of Aliyah from Jewish communities all around the world. Help us bring them home, and let's bless Israel together.
To donate and get information, visit khisrael.org. Lift up your eyes and look around. All your children gather and come to you. The biblical prophecy is unfolding right before our very eyes. The people of Israel are returning to the Promised Land after 2,000 years of exile. But millions of Jews are still longing to come home. Anti-Semitism threatens many of the Jews. We must rescue them before the window of opportunity slams shut. Bless Israel by supporting Keren HaYesod United Israel Appeal, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. Together, we can fulfill the prophecy of the Bible.
Let's bless Israel together.
To donate and get information, visit our website at www.khisrael.org.
Shana Tova to all of you from our eternal capital, Jerusalem. Since last Rosh Hashanah, it's become evident to all but the most bigoted and prejudiced that Israel stands out like a beacon of progress, of modernity, of democracy and of human rights in a region plagued by fanaticism, by terror, by unbelievable savagery. I said it's become obvious to all but the most bigoted, yet we have those people who are leveling slanderous charges against the one and only Jewish state, the only democracy in the Middle East. And we have to repel those slanders. We do that together as we build our state because we're united, proud of our past, confident in our future. And I ask you in this Rosh Hashanah to join with all Israelis, with all the friends of Israel, with the Jewish people everywhere, in wishing for a better future for the world, for the Middle East, and most importantly, for the one and only Jewish state.
A happy Shana Tova to all the Jewish communities worldwide. This is not the normal Shana Tova that we know because of Corona. We can't embrace one another. We can't all crowd the synagogues and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We have to act in a careful manner. But there is also extraordinary news this year because we are starting it with 2 peace treaties that Israel has signed today, that I signed here in Washington with the United Arab Emirates and the Kingdom of Bahrain, with the auspices of President Trump of the United States. This is fabulous news because it's changing our world, because it took us 26 years to go from the second peace treaty that Israel had with an Arab state to the third, and it took us all of 29 days to get to the third and fourth. This gives us wonderful blessings for the new year. A blessing of hope, a blessing of friendship, a blessing of peace, and it augurs well for the people of Israel and for the state of Israel. Shana Tova to all of you.
The biblical prophecy is unfolding right before our very eyes. The people of Israel are returning to the Promised Land after 2,000 years of exile. But millions of Jews are still longing to come home. Bless Israel by supporting Keren HaYesod United Israel Appeal, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. Together, we can fulfill the prophecy of the Bible.
Let's bless Israel together.
To donate and get information, visit khisrael.org.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Rebecca Rand, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us next week for all of your Israel updates.